Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of our show. Today, bringing another really fascinating guest involved in creating a better tomorrow for many people out there. Today on the show, we are joined by Dr. Luis Pizarro, who is Executive Director of the Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative. That is an international not-for-profit research and development organization. They're focused on discovering, developing, and ultimately delivering to the market affordable and patient-friendly treatments for various neglected patients around the world. Dr. Pizarro is a medical doctor and global health leader. He also serves as the founder and member of Global Health 2030 think tank, as a scientific advisor for global health at Sciences Po Paris, as well as a board member of SIDAction, a major French public event that started back in 1994 for raising awareness and collecting charitable funds for AIDS. He's led multiple medical projects for several years in West Africa, and he became the first CEO of Solthis, which successfully developed an international health and solidarity organization to become one of the leaders in health in both West and Central Africa. In 2020, he joined Unitaid's leadership team during the COVID crisis to lead the national organization's HIV portfolio and related access programs. Originally born in Chile, trained as a medical doctor at University of Paris. Dr. Pizarro also holds a master's degree in political science from Sciences Po, as well as an executive health MBA from a joint program, the EHESP School of Public Health, London School of Economics, and ESCP European Management School. A lot of really important themes to get into today. Honored to have him with us. Dr. Luis Pizarro, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Thank you so much to you, Ira, for inviting me.
It's wonderful having you. Would love to start off basically by handing things to you for a little bit, just to talk a little bit more about your background. I in going into the literature, saw that as I mentioned in the bio, you were very active in West Africa early on, in Mali, in Guinea, and Niger. Talk a little bit about sort of the early days and what initially took you from Paris and your medical education to West Africa.
Well, we can start even before that, because I was born in 1973 in Santiago de Chile. That was the year of the coup d'etat to General Pinochet. Yeah. So I spent my first 18 years in a country under a dictator with a lot of social movements, with an appetite for not only freedom, but I would say social justice. And that was absolutely critical for me, in my willingness to spend anything I will do after, but trying to, in a very humble way, of course, but address this issue of social injustice. I had the possibility to get the French nationality and do my medical studies in Paris. And that was also, of course, a very important milestone, very high level education, very strong scientists, big academic teams, etc. But parallel to this, people that were at the beginning of the humanitarian movement, MSF, Doctors Without Borders, they were created in Paris. I had some of doctors like Kushner who were my teachers in the university. So I had a mix of, the very high level academic medical studies, and in the other side, this passion, this strong commitment from this NGO sector. So those mixed made me think that because I was from Chile, South America, had the possibility to be in Europe, I wanted to continue serving people, maybe in other regions, in other areas. And let's be very honest, part of our decisions can be also very self-driven. And I was curious to understand what was going on in other continents, like the African continent. So that made me move to West Africa in 2004.
And a lot of your work in the ensuing years, occurred at this very important intersection of global health, HIV care, and then, what we'll be talking a lot more about, sort of the resource limited setting. 2003, PEPFAR begins. You write this really interesting paper in 2008 November in the Journal of AIDS. It's entitled "The Marriage of Science and Optimized HIV Care in Resource Limited Settings," and you basically show in this paper, like, look, this can be done, whether it's HIV or many other diseases, which we'll be talking about. And a lot of the fears, I guess, at the time, that it would detract from other conditions, or that resistance would spread, or a number of objections, didn't happen. Talk a little bit about some of your learnings in that era, because I think it's very important in terms of where we're going to be going with our discussion in a little bit.
Absolutely. I think HIV was absolutely fundamental to make people understand that it was not acceptable at the late 90s, early 2000s to have millions and millions of HIV patients in the global south, to put it this way, in Africa, Asia, South America, and to have the drugs that were new drugs really changing the life of patients only accessible in the US and Europe. So the international community said, we need to do something here. We need to invest. And a lot of resources, financial resources were invested, but also a lot of new organizations were created. The Gates Foundation, the Global Fund Against HIV, or the PEPFAR in the US. We were part of this movement, and I had the chance to meet, very committed researchers and doctors in Paris who wanted to support national programs in Africa to bring treatments to the patients where they were at this time. And I went for 2 years to Niger with the idea at the time, and again, let's be very honest and transparent with this, that we knew better than everybody what to do. So we will go there to save lives, to put it this way. And I realized, arriving to Niger, that first of all, our colleagues in the country were expecting to be trained, to be supported, but to do it themselves. So they were not asking international doctors to do the job. They wanted to do themselves, but they were open, of course, to learn and to, in a more solidar approach, move together at the beginning. And second, we realized also that we were there for HIV, but HIV was not the only health issue for the patients living in the country. And so it was critical to think about HIV treatment, but how it's integrated in a more, comprehensive support of national health system in low and middle income countries. And it worked. We are really very happy to see that one country after the other, they were able to implement their own national programs. We can talk, if you want, about what is going on today, but at this time, it was very impressive to see, the mobilization we have in those regions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll I'll bring PEPFAR back to this later on, and as we get into the later parts of the show, because I am going to ask you some important questions there. But it's very interesting that a few years later, well, in 2016, another interesting paper you publish is on your experiences with this experimental treatment during one of the Ebola outbreaks in Guinea. And the interesting thing about this, aside from the fact that it was a repurposing story, looking at an influenza drug potentially for applications in Ebola, you also learned about lots of other important things in regard to doing clinical studies for novel things in the resource limited setting, and independent of safety and efficacy and all that, you learned how to set up a trial in a resource limited setting, how to work with the community, how to bring in NGOs. Talk a little bit about these experiences as well, because I think this again naturally sort of fits into where you're going with the DNDi.
Absolutely, and I was thinking about that. I mean, when you look at our baseline at the DNDi, is that we believe it's possible to bring the best science to the most neglected. And to me, working at Solthis, Niger, in Guinea for Ebola, working at Unitaid, and now working at DNDi, everywhere have been convinced that if you put the real efforts, and not only you, but if you are able to engage from the beginning with the patients and with the health workers working with those patients, listen to them and start with the real needs of these people, very, robust and solid research program, you can succeed everywhere. When we look at what the DNDi has done with our Congolese colleagues on sleep and sickness, this is, you have heard about it, a disease, that it's produced by a parasite and transmitted by the tsetse fly. Thousands of people were dying every year on this. The only treatment, and I put brackets here, was based on arsenic, 1 on 20 dying from this treatment. So a real, very, very terrible situation. Those patients were in remote areas, and we were able to develop and implement clinical trials in those places. And thanks to the support of Sanofi, Gates Foundation, and many other colleagues, we were able to register this drug in FDA. So when you know how difficult and how stringent this FDA agency is, doing those clinical trials in those remote places for those very difficult diseases was possible. And so this is not just, utopia. This is a reality that the best science is possible. It's exactly what happened in Guinea for Ebola, where, the situation was a completely disaster. The hospital was overwhelmed. Patients were not coming anymore. Health, workforce the population was against them, putting them outside the villages. So the idea here was, again, to take the time to think what those people need, what they are expecting from us, why they are so scared about doctors, about research, and what we can do. You need to work with social science researchers. It's not just about doctors. And take the time to understand what is going on. Once you have done this, and you are able to mobilize with WHO, with NGOs, with research institutions, everybody together, and have a national coordination, as it was in Guinea, well, months after months, we were able to develop and implement clinical trials in this country, and now have vaccines and some even drugs, monoclonal antibodies, very sophisticated drugs that are working for that. So it's possible, but it needs, to be close to the patients, close to the national stakeholders, and embrace, all the ecosystem with you.
Excellent. So yeah, let's go back then to the beginning of DNDi. Um, and there's a great video actually. We'll put the link to that your organization put out called "Out of the Shadows." Started in 2003, same year as PEPFAR actually, but it's sort of there's a little bit of a backstory as well because the Doctors Without Borders organization gets the Nobel Peace Prize in 1999, and a lot of there's a lot of thinking, a lot of learning at that period that sort of is the genesis for then ultimately what happens a couple of years later. Introduce the organization, a little bit of its history, and then we'll go into a little bit of the portfolio.
Yeah, and to understand the organization, we need to understand the situation of what we call neglected people, neglected population at this time. WHO created a list of tropical neglected diseases that cover today 21 diseases. And we know that 1.6 billion people are affected by those diseases every year. So that means that 20% of the global population are threatened by those diseases, and only 1% of the total research is focusing those diseases. So we call that the fatal imbalance. It's something, of course, MSF at the time considered unacceptable. And this is why they took this Peace Nobel Prize they received to create a group and then an initiative with WHO, of course, but very, very important, with researchers from all around the world, in Brazil, in Kenya, in India, in Malaysia, in Europe. They said it's not something we can fix alone. We need to be together here and seeing what can be done for that. And of course, no big farmers will invest here because there is no profit to be done. We're talking about the most neglected, the poorest of the poor. So pharma alone will not do it. A private philanthropy will not have the means to do that. You can have the money, but you need much more than this. You need labs, you need etc. Academia, research institutions, they couldn't go beyond the research piece and bring the drug to the patients. And ministers of health in those countries, they were too poor, to be able to manage that alone. And so the idea of DNDi was to say, if we are able to make the scientific knowledge a common good, put everybody around the table, everyone bringing something that it's, your specific added value to that, all together we can do it. And for sleep and sickness, I was mentioning before, Sanofi brought a molecule. Gates Foundation and some countries brought the financial resources. Academia, Pasteur, Belgium, many researchers brought the preclinical work. Democratic Republic of Congo brought, and Guinea, for instance, they brought their staff, their research in the country. The patients were there. MSF was there. All together, we developed a drug now that is curing. We'll have, a test and treat approach. You test somebody positive, you bring one pill, and that's it. They are cured. And we were able to celebrate in January in Guinea the elimination of sleep and sickness. Some countries have already done that. And our aim is in 2030 being able to do that also in DRC, Congo-Kinshasa. So it works. This is, I would like to say, the positive message here in the current world. When you see the conflicts, when you see that sometimes everything is dark at the end of the day, well, the international community is able sometimes to do collective effort and have those amazing results.
Yeah, no, that's it's an awesome example, and again for the audience, DNDi has many. I mean, again, 40 projects, something like 25 different clinical trials, and we'll put a link to the portfolio. But there's a very nice sort of browsable system here that shows, everything that you have going on in terms of drug discovery, translational research, the clinical trials, and what's near registration. I mean, in terms of that sleeping sickness example, okay, as you mentioned, you brought together big pharma, Gates, Pasteur, government health ministries, MSF. When it comes to some of these conditions, and we've talked about some of these on the show, sort of the vaccine perspective, whether it's dengue or leishmaniasis, Chagas disease, what is it? I mean, how do you start off a typical project? I mean, I know most of these are small molecules, so we're not talking about vaccines here at all, but because you're doing everything from sort of early AI-based drug discovery on through. Take us through a typical, how you decide, all right, today, we're going to focus on dengue. This happened. This is the plan for the next couple of years. Walk us through an example, if you would, like the sleeping sickness one.
No, absolutely. I will never insist enough about the importance to start with the patients. They are the one who knows better than everyone else what are their needs and what they are really expecting from us, to deliver at the end of this journey. So taking the time to see sleeping sickness, we needed a safe drug, right? Because the former one was based in arsenic, one of 20 people dying. It's unacceptable. You as a doctor, you will never would like to give a drug and saying, well, good luck, fingers crossed, I hope I'm not going to kill you, right? No. So safety, fundamental. It can be about affordability. You can develop the best drug ever. If it's too expensive, nobody's taking it. Take the hepatitis C example. Right. That was very difficult disease, chronic treatment. And almost now 15 years ago, we had a new drug that was curing, really a cure in almost 10 weeks. Fantastic. But the problem is that this treatment was between $50,000 and $100,000 per patient. So you're sure that almost 90% of hepatitis C patients in the world will never have access to this drug. And so we said, okay, the drug is there, it's not accessible. And we found an Egyptian lab, Farco. We found the Malaysian government that was very invested. And together with them and some other partners like MSF and others, we developed a new drug, a new antiviral, with a cost that is today around $300-400 per patient. So a significant decrease and a significant, of course, access for the patient. So this is the second one, affordability, what important one. And then it's also about logistics. I mean, if you are in Kinshasa or in remote places, if you need a strong logistic, fridge, cold chain, and all of that, it will never work. You need to have a heat-stable, easy-to-take pill by the patient. Sometimes I take the example of even the color. I have heard in Africa sometimes from colleagues that when it's a white pill, they think it's for white people, and they would prefer to have a black pill that will be more suitable for black people. So, I mean, the first time I listened at that, I was like, no, come on. But is that the reality? We need to just open the eyes, listen to the patient, listen to the communities, and go in this direction. So honestly, this is the most important starting point. And then it depends. If there is nothing at all, you need to start from scratch. So you need to look for basic science, preclinical, go in the labs, look, take advantage of artificial intelligence to try to go faster and cheaper, because that can be very, very expensive, and try, to develop a molecule that then you can test at the clinical level. So go for clinical trials, then register the drug, and then think how to produce it and how to make it accessible for patients, in the field. This is the long journey. If there is nothing, you need to do all of that, right? And it takes 10 to 15 years. Sometimes it happens that you have a drug, but it's working for the disease A, and you say, well, why we don't try it for the disease B? Right. And so you will start from the clinical trial, and you will gain 5, 6 years here, and you will bring that sooner. And sometimes it can even happen that the drug for the disease is there, but it has never been registered, or it had never been made accessible for the patients. So your work will be shorter and will be just to ensure that this drug that is already there is really, making an impact for the most neglected population. So this is, I would say, more or less of course, the way we work, and we're not alone. As I said before, our real added value is to be able to bring people together and to see what is going on outside. So we try also to focus our effort on, issues that are not addressed by others and that are very important for the patients. You mentioned dengue. Everybody was working on vaccine. Very important, of course. But the problem is that today, 20% more or less of dengue infections will be severe dengue infections with sometimes even internal hemorrhages, where people die from that. And you need to have a treatment to take care of those patients, not only for them individually, but even for the country, because you have the same situation you have in COVID. You have an outbreak of dengue. Hospitals are completely overwhelmed. So your people are dying from dengue, but are also dying from other diseases that cannot be taken into account in the hospital. So this is the reason why we decided to now have a very strong commitment on dengue, because there is no drug. It's amazing to imagine that dengue today, happening all around the world, almost all around the world, no treatment at all.
Luis, when you mentioned Sanofi's involvement before with the sleeping sickness program, and I've profiled folks like Mads Thompson from the Novo Nordisk Foundation and Ann Ertz over at Novartis. Obviously, we think of sort of people think, oh, big pharma doesn't get involved in this stuff, but they do get involved at different levels. I'm just interested in sort of where, in the relationships with big pharma, are they coming to the table more nowadays sort of from the repurposing angle? Like, hey, we have these 5 million compounds over here that we've tested for X, Y, and Z, but we've never tested them for A, B, and C. Are they coming to the table just at the sort of the clinical stage? Where's big pharma fitting in nowadays? Because I think we normally think about they're not around, but they are around in different from different angles.
Yeah, we need to, and I know that we tend to simplify sometimes for communicational reasons, but it's good to take the time also to develop some complexity. First of all, when we talk about neglected patients, let's be very clear. They are neglected by the traditional for-profit pharma ecosystem because you will never get money from them. That's true. But they are also neglected by many countries that consider those as minorities because ethnic reasons, because gender orientation, because they live too far to be important for them, because they don't vote, etc., etc. So let's not just stay on why the pharma model is neglecting them. They are neglected for many other reasons than just this one. Second, the pharma environment is very heterogeneous. Most of the time we think about the big pharma, the ones who you mentioned, Novo, you mentioned Novartis, etc. And in this big pharma environment, we have very different situations. Sanofi, Novartis, Novo Nordisk, they have a social commitment. They work very closely with us, and we have developed very, very good partnerships. It has not been the case for all of them. And as we say in Spanish, you say good about your friends and you say nothing about the others. So I mentioned those, we can work with them, and this is very good. But they are not alone, the big pharmas. You have the biotechs, and we need them too, because the biotechs are the one bringing, innovation, new molecules, etc. They are more profit-driven, but we need to make them understand that they have also a social role to play. We have new countries entering. India has a long tradition on generic, but they want to produce now their own blockbusters. So how the Indian industry is going to move, it's a big question mark. China, people were thinking about China in the past as a big market to sell drugs. Today, they understood that China is not only that, China is producing one of the top science in the world and bringing a lot of biotech with new molecules, and people are looking China differently. And we have countries too that have invested in public pharma, like Brazil, like Malaysia, for instance, where the government said it's our responsibility to ensure that needs of our population are well addressed. So let's try to differentiate a little bit those different stakeholders, and our, I would say, role, our mission is to be able to propose to each of them, right, an opportunity to collaborate and to be part of this adventure, I would say, creating a common good.
It's interesting because amongst the quite broad portfolio you have, there's this one section that popped out entitled Pandemic Preparedness, and preparedness, obviously, the last couple of years has been quite an important topic. You are actively involved in several quite ambitious drug discovery projects on coronaviruses, on enteroviruses, flaviviruses. We talked about Ebola a little bit. Could you say a little word about this? Because, one of the trends that we've been seeing as we've talked to people in biopreparedness, in the biodefense space, is, this sort of transition, hey, maybe we shouldn't be discovering something for coronavirus and something for flavivirus, but look at sort of the broad similarities between these viruses and, universal mechanisms against the inflammation that occurs and the allergic response and all that bit. Talk a little bit about how you think about pandemic preparedness, because a lot of these, Ebola, right? I mean, emerges mostly from neglected areas initially. Talk about how you think about pandemic preparedness at DNDi.
Well, many different elements here. I think we need to be very conscious of all the environmental changes going on.
Sure.
We'll have more and more, impact in this type of outbreak. You said Ebola. We all know how deforestation, had an impact on the bats, and then how that was developed. We see that for climate change. Dengue is so important today because this mosquito is now, arriving to regions we never thought. In my country, in Chile, we never thought we'll have dengue in the extreme south, of Latin America, and dengue is there. Dengue is in Europe, it's in the south of the US. I mean, climate change is changing here, and it's changing those zones, and is, bringing new threats here. So the environmental piece is one, and we try to address that as much as possible for us. The second one, I would say, is that when we put in place those clinical trials, again, promoting the best science always, we would like that the scientific knowledge is shared and stay in those sites. So people that have been trained to do a sleep and sickness clinical trial must be able to engage 1 year after or 2 years after into an Ebola trial, into an Mpox trial, etc., etc. So you cannot have a sort of silo approach, one single disease only. You need to be able to strengthen research capacities in those different settings. So there is something there when a new outbreak, when a new pandemic is coming. The third element is that countries alone cannot address, this type of big threats. So you need international cooperation. At the regional level, when COVID happened, we put it in place with many other colleagues, a network of research institutions in Africa. Today it's called PANTHER. They are working, for instance, now in Mpox, and it's driven, by African scientists that work together. Again, solidarity in science, it's absolutely fundamental. So anticipating, in different sites, but also in the architecture of the collective response is very important. Next element is what you mentioned. When COVID happened, we didn't have a strong pipeline of molecules to be tested. And we were forced to take molecules that we knew were not strong, but because it was dry. So we are working now, and we hope that NIH will resume that with many researchers around the world to build a very strong and accurate pipeline of molecules that are ready to use. One new pandemic coming for each family of virus you mentioned before. Well, there are some molecules there that are ready to be tested and to be controlled. So this is part of the job we're doing too. And maybe the last one I would like to share with you is what we have done at the political level. Our team has been very engaged in the pandemic treaty negotiations here at WHO in Geneva, and we insisted in something very specific, that is to say, when countries are investing public money, public funds, we need to be able to have public return of investment. It's not possible that a vaccine, mRNA vaccine, was developed thanks to hundreds of millions of public money, and there is no negotiation possible from those governments to make those vaccines accessible for everyone. So it's about science, it's about the capacity to work together and anticipate, but it's also about a good political framework to respond in an equitable way.
Luis, I have to go into one other aspect of the portfolio we have you today, because I think as we've been going from the dengues and Leischmaniasis diseases that I don't think I'm going to run into those too often, as I don't travel as much as you do. Obviously, many of us affected by the pandemic. But one that I think we are all neglected patients for, which everyone I think I've spoken to about this, it's coming fast and furious, is this pandemic, or the silent pandemic they call it, of antimicrobial resistance. I've seen this front and center in some personal stories, which I won't go into on the show, but we are all potential neglected patients here. The pharma pipelines for novel antibiotics dried up a long time ago. You have a collaboration with GRDP, which talked a little bit on the show in the past. Say again a couple of words about what you're doing here, because this is one that I think is being ignored more than it should be. It should be ignored at all, but we know it's here, and we know it's coming fast and furious. So please.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. As I said, this is something, when we talk about neglected disease, you never can do that alone, and you need to be able also to pass the baton, I would say, to organizations that can develop. During COVID, we created this group PANTHER that is now implementing clinical trials, for instance, on Mpox. The first drug we developed was on malaria, and there is an institution now called MMV working in malaria, so we passed the baton to them. And when we started, understanding that AMR, as you said very well, was also a neglected health issue, we thought, well, is it something we can integrate into our portfolio, or would be more efficient to have a specific group working on that? We talked to WHO, World Health Organization, and we decided together to create this new entity called GRDP, who is doing let's say, something similar to us developing new drugs, but for antimicrobial resistance topics, especially in neonatal diseases and sexual reproductive health. Here, the situation, it's a little bit different from tropical diseases where you have, this poverty, low and middle income countries, etc. As you said very well, AMR is all around the world, Europe, in the US, everywhere. The point is that the traditional pharma system doesn't see that as a very profitable sector, because the best way to avoid having resistance, first of all, is to prescribe well and to treat less. So into an economical thinking, you're not take too much money on that. And second, the drugs you're going to develop will be very specific, not big volumes, et cetera, et cetera. So GARD-P has been working now since 5 years, using a little bit the same logic than us, showing to pharma that it's possible to do something if they join a global effort. They have also engaged with, I would say, emerging economies that are conscious of the threat AMR can be for them, so they are ready to engage here. They have been able also to bring philanthropists, to work with them. And now, very fast, they are delivering. They have used drugs that were already there, I would say, that needed to be tested in clinical trials, but without going to the discovery side, as I said before. So really trying to go very fast. And as I said, after 5-6 years, they are already bringing to those countries very efficient drugs against gonorrhea, for instance, that will be, game changers in the future. What is also interesting is to see that we are developing, some synergies together, because what could be one of the obstacles to move forward is getting a pharma that can, manufacture those drugs, right? Because you can develop a molecule, you can register, but then who is going to produce that? That costs a lot. And if you're not getting a lot of result, well, you are hesitant. So we discuss more and more with other organizations that are doing similar job to us to be able to put in place some platforms, some collective platforms where all together, we could, for instance, do some clinical operation, we could do some regulatory affair to register the drugs, or we could do manufacturing and then make those drugs accessible. So it's a very interesting move. In the current context, it's absolutely critical. With less resources, we need to be more efficient, and we need to be able to work together.
Mm-hmm. And talking about efficiency, could you say a couple of words about there's a component of the website that talks about artificial intelligence and advanced technologies. Obviously, using the AI, the machine learning, sort of in the early stages of drug development, screening compounds, and all that. But the e-health component is kind of interesting because obviously, when you're out in the resource limited environment, whether it's a distributed clinical trial or whether you're monitoring some strange outbreak of something over here that you're not sure, but we have to report it in real time. Talk a little bit of how the development of the current eHealth suite of tools is helping you out there, because that's an important piece, as you were mentioning, about the inefficiencies and getting the right information, capture it and send it to the right people quickly nowadays in the real world scenarios.
Well, again, I will repeat myself, but let's be very humble here, because probably most of the developments AI will bring are still, in front of us, and we are just, getting little pieces here or there. But we are convinced we need to go there. we have been able, for instance, to enhance, improve our discovery work in terms of, I don't know, let's take an example of how to find a right molecule that could address one of the diseases. A lot of work start reading articles and trying to look for the keywords in the article, which one, will connect with the other one, etc., etc. Well, human beings, even the most faster readers, will be reading, I don't know, 10, 15 articles per day maximum if you want to be, thorough. So if you want to read 100 articles, it will take months. You put your keywords, you put connections, etc., the right prompts in AI today, and you will have results of months and months of former human work in minutes. Saying, okay, the first, let's say, options you should explore could be here, there, and there. So the time and, of course, the resources you're getting, it's amazing. It can be very simple, said like this, but it makes a lot of difference. Second, you can try to explore more in a sort of architectural way proteins and what could block proteins. And with artificial intelligence today, it's very interesting because you can, modelize, reproduce those proteins, test different molecules. Are they going to block, for instance, the entrance of the virus into the cell? And so after that, have a much better idea on the molecule you would like to test in the lab and go to animal models after, for instance. This is something also very interesting. Something that is critical for us too in neglected diseases is that we're missing data sometimes, right? Because those people are neglected, diseases are neglected. It's not the same where you are talking diabetes in the US. You have million and million of database to be explored by artificial intelligence. Here, we need to use another one that it's how, from a very little information, you can make sort of reproductive models, exploring different options to anticipate what could be done by our researchers in the future. And this is something we are exploring too. And maybe another one, not to be too long, but that can be very useful is when you have to register a drug, it can take years. I mean, it's a very, very long process to you that are bringing the drug, but also for the regulatory agency. And with the Gates Foundation, with the FDA and some other agencies, we're trying to see how artificial intelligence will absolutely improve the way we do those registration and can, of course, improve the time drugs are accessible for patients. So honestly, all around this journey, end-to-end research process, artificial intelligence is playing a role in each step, for sure.
Luis, at the beginning when we started chatting, I said I would sort of try to come full circle to one of the themes, and again, I said pediatric HIV is part of your portfolio, and it's interesting because you were one of the signatories on this Vancouver consensus, this important paper about 10 years ago in the Lancet, entitled "Antiretroviral Medicines: Medical Evidence and Political Will." And sort of that paper rounds up talking about, not just the existing therapies, but the importance of the development and availability of pre-exposure prophylaxis. And PrEP has, in the ensuing 10 years, has really come a long way. We're, at this U equals U stage. I just, love to have your 2025 perspective on where we are. Obviously, a lot of political machinations with PEPFAR going on right now. We'll see where that all lands, but can you just sort of, I know this is a little separate from the organization, but I'd love to get your feedback, your thoughts on where we are in 2025, as it pertains to, sort of this next generation of opportunities that many look at as a sort of a putative cure for this disease?
First of all, I think the HIV community can be very, very proud of what has been done in the last 25 years, for sure. And at many, many levels. Of course, science, and we had the example with the new drug, lenacapavir, that is almost a vaccine, right? I know my colleagues don't like to hear that, but when you will go to one injection per year, like the flu vaccine, one injection per year. So we have been able, in a very short period of time, to develop a terrific research and science improvement in this disease. Of course, we can be proud of that. We have been also developing, I would say, a collective consciousness of patients' rights. Most of the countries today that have put in place patients' bills or patients' policies, etc., it's because the HIV community was there to push for that. All organisms like the Global Fund were created because the HIV movement and the democracy, I would say, the way they are governed with civil society and communities, in the board of those organizations, is because the advocacy that has been done by this movement. And of course, all the investment, financial time, etc., etc. So first of all, let's be very proud of the work we have done and that we are still doing. Because, of course, many things are going on at the time, but the HIV community is alive and is doing a great job. It has been inspiring for us at DNDi. It has been inspiring for many other organizations working in other health topics, and we acknowledge, what the HIV community has done. As you said, unfortunately, and it's not only the US situation. The US situation is, what has accelerated a trend we were having before. The disengagement of some countries, sometimes some organizations, from the research, component, from the health component, was something coming in the last 3-4 years. Okay, COVID was a bubble, but before COVID, the trend was like this, and after the COVID, the trend is still there. So what happened in the US was, of course, brutal, was, of course, something that, we're like, wow, how this is possible. But it's not something isolated. What is coming after, we don't know. We need to now start thinking how to manage unpredictability. I have heard that maybe PEPFAR will resume. How it's going to resume, what are the volumes, we don't know. But we're listening every week, different things. So my point here is that what we know is that the statu quo, coming back to a situation where 10 years ago, this is not possible. This is not a plan. This will never happen. So our role as a DNDi, as international organization, in order to serve those neglected populations, because this has to stay our North Star of everything we do, is to rethink the way we work, is to be strong, as I said before, on the common good. This is not about, a sort of hippie international solidarity walk or whatever you want to call it, one side and the other side, the national interest with a very robust economic perspective. No, this is too simple. Here, we're talking about how we build something in the global interest. Pandemic, as you said, are not going to be managed by one country. It's the whole international community that needs to manage that. So when we invest there, we invest for all of us and not just for one of them. So this is a very important point. The second one is how we're going to be able to still bring people together, as I said before, because we have shown it works. when the private, the public sector, different countries, etc., they're working together, we're able to do such an amazing things. And so we need to keep the light, on this collective effort. And maybe something we will see in the future, and I hope, is that countries that were just, receiving resources from the international community for their own health issues, now they are realizing that, well, this is not going to be a sustainable solution for the future, and they need to go for their own responses. And I'm very happy to see, for instance, in Africa, how at the regional level, Africa CDC, Africa Medicine Agency, the African Development Bank are being leaders in the response now of many health issues, but also countries, Nigeria, Kenya, Rwanda, etc., are models of ownership and how, to take their solution for the future. Of course, we have seen already that with Brazil, with India, and with many others. But this is a trend that will increase time after time. And at DNDi, we are very proud and very happy to be working with them to make that a reality.
Awesome message. Very important message. Luis, just a couple of days ago, you released the 2024 DNDi national report, annual report, where you basically talk about everything you were just mentioning in terms of the uncertainty, in terms of the need to keep pushing forward. What else is coming up that we should know about while we have you today, as we get into the latter part of 2025 and get ready for 2026? Anything I missed bringing up, and then other sort of public-facing initiatives, conferences, other talks that you're going to be present at, please.
Yeah. And thank you very much for taking the time to read all of those articles and to be so well prepared for that. It's not a usual situation, so I very much appreciate that. Thank you. I would say an important milestone we have in front of us is elimination. We have been able to prove it's feasible for sleep and sickness. We celebrated that this year in Guinea. Amazing achievement by the Guinean partners first and the international community. And we think that this is feasible also for other diseases like Leishmaniasis. We're very happy that countries like India are committed to that, and will probably will have good news next year on this. Excellent. But in Africa, East Africa, countries decided to work together. They signed an agreement during World Health Assembly here in Geneva in May to collaborate and to work close with us, with WHO, and with many other stakeholders to make this a reality. So we need to prove that elimination is not a dream. It's really feasible. Second, as I said, science has to be everywhere. Research solutions cannot be developed in Europe for African problems or Latin American problems. Everybody talk about local manufacturing, and it's an important, step, of course, to be able to produce drugs close to patients and communities. But this will be impossible if we're not able to implement, to put in place a strong R&D ecosystem, with researchers, with labs, with clinical trial sites that are able to do this. Science, it's a comprehensive approach. It cannot be a little bit of production here, a little bit of clinical trial there, a little bit of basic science there. No, that has to be. Brazil is a very good example of putting in place a whole chain of research. They are now able to negotiate with pharma, prices, etc., because they have an end-to-end strategy for that, and that will be developing, and we want to support that. And maybe something we hope also that we'll be able to explore in the future is, to bring for diseases like dengue, like Chagas, like onchocerciasis, the good treatments. At the moment, we are not there, right? So we have second class, I would say, treatments for this, and we need to make this best science for all a reality in terms of good drugs for diseases today that are really very, very neglected. Maybe the last one is, I mentioned the political environment. We'll continue supporting, negotiations around pandemic treaty, but we hope countries will start now implementing those conditions into national policies, and will be following very closely how those spaces like the G20, G7, the BRICS are keeping health as one of the pillars of the discussions going on. We need to be careful because health sometimes is, pushed silently away from the political agenda, and our role is to be very strong and make, very clear that health has to be in the middle, of course, connected to others. It's about, social sectors and health. It's about environment. The COP30 in Brazil this year will be very much about environment, global warming, and health.
Yep.
Definitely. Those issues are interconnected. But let's be very careful. Let's not forget health of neglected patients.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and I like how you ended up with the, on that One Health concept, which is becoming, we're seeing it in all aspects of these themes that we're touching on. No, but this is it's very inspiring. I look forward, and I'm rooting you on as you continue to move the organization forward in these interesting times we're in today. But really impressive. Again, for everybody that is going to be listening to this episode of the show across the various podcast networks, or who will be watching on the YouTube channel. Again, you've been spending time with Dr. Luis Pizarro, Executive Director, Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative, doing really amazing things to discover, develop, and deliver these affordable and patient-friendly treatments to neglected patients all over the world. Luis, again, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to talk to us today for a little while about everything going on at the organization. I say thank you for everything you do for patients around the world. And as we like to say on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow via what you do. Really a great story.
Thank you very much. And you are also contributing doing this to make those diseases less neglected. So thank you to you also for being part of this journey.
Wonderful having you.